And now I want to invite the owner of Callicrate Cattle Company to come back up again. It is this issue that exemplifies the lack of attention to one of the two most important factors, and that is complete ignorance of the uniqueness of the small independent operator, small and mid-sized independent operator, as well as the intrinsic value that these small businesses have to the economic futures of rural America. Mike?
Thanks, Bill. I wanted to relate a story. I was 10 years from graduating from high school. It was in 1979 at our class reunion. And I was in Evergreen, Colorado, where I graduated. And I was out for a picnic, a class picnic, out at Tina Owens's place, one of my classmates. Her parents own the Eversman Company. Designed a lot of that equipment, farm equipment that you see today that's painted green. Mrs. Owens said, "Mike, what are you doing these days?" And I said, "Well, I'm farming and ranching." And she says, "Oh, wow." She says, "You're a wealth creator." And I thought, what do you mean by that? I hadn't even thought about it. Who's a farmer? What is a farmer? How important is a farmer? And she says, yeah. She said, when I was a little girl, my grandfather told me that farmers create wealth and everyone else does the laundry. Well, what Bill Bullard explained here a little bit ago is we've got a lot of folks around St. Francis here that create a lot of wealth, but they don't necessarily share in the fruits of that labor and that investment of agriculture because of big agribusinesses holding a monopoly cartel position over us, controlling our markets, controlling our government agencies. And how important is it for a farmer to create wealth? It's the very foundation of community. It's the very foundation of the national economy. Ben Franklin said, a farmer plants a seed in soil and water and adds sunshine, and it's as if by magic wealth is created. A farmer is important, and the more of them the better, not the fewer. Today, this operation as you see it today is holding about 500 animals. Since 1998, when the big meat packers informed me that they were no longer going to buy my cattle, I have not been able to feed cattle for the big packers. That's why I started Ranch Foods Direct, which is the hamburgers you ate today. And by the way, there's some if you want to take them home. We ended up with a few extras. But I mean, how does really good beef taste? You got a sample of that today. Small operators that keep the cattle clean, that don't use the hormones, the antibiotics, the steroids, the growth promotants. It's all reflected in the way that food tastes and the way your body receives that food and the health that you can enjoy as a result. 500 head of cattle in a 12,000 head operation. How much good is that doing for this community? We used to employ 15 families in this operation. We used to buy a lot of corn, a lot of hay. We were a driver, an economic driver in this community from the perspective of this cattle operation which we've invested in for so long. We're being prevented from doing that today because of the big meat packers. We need the GIPSA rules. Pat Roberts, Jerry Moran have been against us the entire time. They have been listening to the Kansas Livestock Association, who represents the biggest meat packers and the biggest processors and their partner feed yards that supply them the cattle that allow them that ability to suppress price to us. That's who they support, not us here in rural America. In addition to that, as Bill described about the abusive regulations, HACCP in meat packing, which I'm familiar with, has driven out so many people, but has it given us safer food? No, it's given us less safe food. We've got packers running chains at 400 head an hour with inexperienced workers. You've got to speak, on the average, 110 languages to communicate in the typical big meat packing plant. They aren't producing better food or safer food. They aren't even producing safe food. And we talk about the standards and how those standards meant to regulate a big corporation are applied to the little guys. The fact is, they aren't even enforced on the big organizations and the big companies that have a seat at the table during not only legislation, but during the rulemaking of laws that are passed. And they make them serve them, not us. We've got JBS and Greeley with and JBS and Kersey, each feedlot with 100,000 cattle in it, always full. Of course, they're a meat packer. They've got a market for their cattle. They are on the Platte River. They're not like me, 3.5 miles from the Republican River. They're on the Platte River with 200,000 head of animals. Who's watching them? I want clean water. I'm an environmentalist. I want a safe environment. I want communities that work. I get up every day fighting for income at the farm and ranch gate, fighting for sustainable rural communities, and fighting for this ag class that's sitting right here today, Thomas Douthit and his friends, so that they can have a place in this industry and be part of our food system. The environmentalists, like myself, are being played for fools today by the EPA. The EPA is representing the interests of big corporations, not small feeders. KDHE has been involved in this operation for over 25 years. They helped design our controls, our pollution controls, all of the design, the layout, the drainage of this operation. They helped design that, and they approved that. They've been operating in this yard, and during the entire time that this feed production area and feed stock area has been in the position that it is today. Very little water runs off of that, doesn't even hardly make it into the pasture next door, and it's not contaminated, it is not polluted. We direct water around our feed stocks so it doesn't end up in any waterways, if it could even make it 3.5 miles. This idea that this number 2 lagoon was too full of water on February 2nd, what are we going to do, pump it in the middle of the winter? No, we had redesigned and reconfigured our controls to where number 2 fills up and runs over into number 3, which is more than big enough to meet the requirements of our runoff. Why did EPA put an order out without even talking to Kansas Department of Health and Environment, without even talking to me or AJ Jones about our situation and what we had designed and what we had been allowed to do? Why did they just announce it nationally and we find out in the national news along with everybody else? What are they after here? Why are they coming after the sustainable operation, the environmentally friendly operation, the operation that cares about animals and the way animals are treated? Why are they coming after me? That's the question that is still needing to be answered. And a message to President Obama: you promised us fair markets. You promised that you would do something about the anti-competitive practices of big meat packers. Those GIPSA rules are sitting on your desk, and Mr. President, we need those implemented now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.